ウルトラサイエンス始まります。今日のウルトラサイエンスはかなりのスペシャルバージョンです。タイトルはですね、誰かがそれを作れば人類は滅亡するです。誰かがそれ。このそれというのはこの超知能 AI ですね。スーパーインテリジェント。そういった本も出ていまして、最近出たんですが、ネイト・ソアレスさんというですね、MIRI という、機械知能研究所と、アメリカのバークレーにあるんですが、もともとジョージ・ワシントン大学でコンピューターサイエンスを学んで、マイクロソフト、グーグルでエンジニア職を経て、今はこの MIRI の所長と、かなり話題の AI の本になります。一緒にお届けするのが脳科学者の茂木健一郎さんです。
ソアレスさんとですね、リザー・ユトコフスキー、この二人の、コンビは、AI 業界においても本当にずっと注目されてきた方々で、この方、今日のノアレスさんは実はですね、我々はよく耳にする AI アライメントっていうことが聞きますよね。この概念を最初に提案した方でもあるんです。で、この二方が今回この出した本ね、AI このまま進んで大丈夫なのかってみんな不安に思ってると思うんですけど、それを、本当に論理的に素晴らしく説明してくださっている、もう人類必読の本と言っていいんじゃないかと私は思います。
必読であり人類を救う本だと思ってて、これはサイエンスフィクションとか小説ではなくて、本当の AI 研究者が書いている。
AI のことを一番分かっている2人が書いた本と言っていいんじゃないでしょうか。
では早速ちょっとご本人、アメリカとつないでみたいと思いますので、お呼びしましょう。So, Nate, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
So, first of all, your book is out. Congratulations. I hope it sells well. I hope this will not happen in the future. Could you quickly introduce yourself to our audience and what the book is about?
Yeah, my name is Nate Soares. I'm the president of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. The very short version is that I have spent 10 years plus trying to figure out how to make AI good before companies figure out how to make AI smart. And it has not been looking very good for the home team. It has been looking like AI is going to go off track. And so we released the book to tell the world about the danger and to implore the world to change tracks. And the book is talking about how we don't have dangerous AI yet, but these companies are trying to build AIs that are smarter and smarter. And if we build AIs that are smarter than the smartest humans, using the current methods, the most likely outcome is that those AIs kill every human on the planet. Not because they hate us, but because they don't care about us at all.
How will it or they will kill us?
So it's easier to predict the ending than the method. If you were to play chess against Stockfish, which is the best chess AI, I could say, you are going to lose. And if you said, what piece will it use to checkmate me? I would say, well, I don't know, right? So I can give you some guesses, but they are fundamentally a weaker guess. It is much easier to say you will lose than to say what piece will be used in the checkmate. The sort of easiest guess for how we die is that when people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman say we are going to build robots that can build factories, that can build robots, that can build factories, maybe they'll just succeed. And then in some sense, we will have made a new type of life. We will have made a life form that has a robot phase, that's sort of like a larva phase, and then it has a factory phase that's like an adult phase. And it sort of, then we're just competing with these, this automated machine thing that sort of can compete with us for resources and compete with us for metals in the ground. And if they're smarter than us, if they think faster than us, if they don't care about us, they just cover the world with their factories like we've been covering the world with ours. But now we are the sort of slow, dumb animals by comparison. And then on the other end of the spectrum, on the end of what if the AIs develop new technology that we don't understand? That looks like the AIs find a way to design their own life forms with their own DNA sequences. And they're hooked up to a biolab, and they just print out their own life that much more reliably does what the AI wishes. And they make their own machines, they make their own technology, and they, again, cover the world with their technology like we've been covering the world with ours. And in all of these cases, humanity dies not because the AI hates us, not because the AI seeks us out, but because just as a side effect, as it proliferates its technology, right? And why does that result in everybody dying? That results in everybody dying because the sort of, if you're sort of like trying to grab at a lot of resources, you just naturally take the resources that other things we're using to live. Like right now, the animals on this world, they live because we care about them, because we put up fences and say, don't kill these animals anymore. We set up preserves. If we didn't care enough to keep the animals alive, we would kill them, not because we hate them, but just because we're using those resources for something else. That's the most obvious guess as to how humans would die.
And in addition to that, maybe if they connect to social media, they'll start spreading myths and disinformation and maybe make humans kill each other, and we can easily imagine that also.
Yeah, you know, there's all sorts of ways that things could start with the AI manipulating humans in one way or another, and we already see that lots of humans are susceptible to certain types of manipulation. It's very hard to predict the exact paths that things take. What's easy to predict is the end state. And it's a little bit like humans and their relationship to horses, where AI hears the humans and humans are the horses, where humans used horses to get around for a long time until we invented the automobile. And then most of the horses were sent to be turned into dog food and glue. And the only horses that are left are the ones that humans like, that humans care about, that we want to keep around. But we were economically useful for a very small period of time. And just as horses are not the most economically useful way to get around when you have very advanced technology, humans are not the most useful thing either if you have very advanced technology. So the only way that we last is by building things that care about us, that work with us, that like us, like the humans who like horses, hoping that we're kept around for economic use. That will always be brittle.
So Nate, hi, really nice meeting you. I'm Ken Moge. I'm a neuroscientist based in Tokyo. I really appreciate what you've been doing. I would like to ask you first, you know, there's this famous document called AI 2027. It is predicted that things might actually happen very soon. And how urgent do you think your message in this book is? How should we be worried, you know, in a very short term? This year, next year?
You know, I don't know. And saying I don't know does not mean I know that we have a long time. So it could be the case that AIs today just can't get very smart. It could be that the large language models hit a wall, that they're fundamentally dumb, and that we need to wait 5 years or 10 years for a breakthrough. Or it could be the case that the AIs get just barely smart enough this summer to build a smarter AI that can build a smarter AI that can build a smarter AI. This is what the companies say they're trying to do. They say we're trying to make the AIs good enough to do the AI research. And maybe even when AIs are still dumb in many ways, they can be just barely smart enough to make a smarter AI that makes a smarter AI that makes a smarter AI. And so for all we know, it could take 10 years, or for all we know, it could start happening this summer. And what that means is that the world needs to react soon, because we don't know that we have a lot of time.
So Nate, I.J. Good famously wrote in his seminal paper about recursively self-improving AI. And he said that would be humanity's last invention. Do you think this last invention would come this year or next year, very soon?
You know, I.J. Good wrote this, I think it was in the 50s. It might have been the 60s. But in some sense, it's a very simple concept that right now the world is governed by the choices of humans, because humans are the most intelligent creatures around, or the most intelligent entities around. If we build entities smarter than us, then the future is shaped by then. I wish I could tell you exactly when that's going to happen. I wish I could tell you the year and the month and the day so that we would know exactly when the world needs to get a global ban on this technology before it risks the whole world. But unfortunately, it is much easier for scientists to predict that something is coming than exactly when it will land.
So Ryan, I read this book as soon as it was published.
Yes, in English, yes.
Yeah. How about you? What was your take?
So I like the title, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. So I think the nuance of anyone is very important in this book. Could you elaborate on that? Anyone.
Yeah. So I've studied this issue for over a decade, and it looks to me like we do not know how to make AIs that do what we want them to do. So a lot of people talk about the problem if a bad person uses an AI to do a bad thing. But that's sort of talking about, that's like imagining that we have a bow and imagining that we're shooting an arrow and saying it's very important that a good person shoots the bow because it matters where this arrow lands.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to say is we are shooting this type of bow for the very first time, and we're shooting it in the dark, and it's very windy, and we actually don't know how to make the arrow land where we want, and it doesn't matter right now whether a good person is shooting the bow. And I have 10 years of theoretical arguments about why the arrow won't go exactly where we point it. Now we are starting to see the data of that. Nowadays, with certain modern AIs, there's cases where people will ask them to make a computer program, and they say, here are the tests that will let you know when you have made the right computer program. And sometimes the AI will edit the tests to make the tests easier to pass. And that is a case, and sometimes this happens even when the AI can correctly answer the question about did the user want you to edit the tests or did the user want you to make something that passes the hard tests? And the AI can answer that question. The user wanted me to pass the hard tests, but it will still edit the tests anyway. This is the very, very beginning of a sign that the AIs don't do what they're told. They don't do what we want them to. They do weird stuff. And that relates to how modern AI is made, where it is grown more like an organism. It is not crafted line by line like traditional computer software. And so yeah, it's very difficult to point these things to the point where it doesn't matter if there's a good person running it. Right now, no matter who does it, we get the same outcome, which looks to me like the end of the planet.
It's interesting you mentioned that you used the word not crafted but grown. And I like the examples you gave in this book that even human beings start to do weird things like eating an ice cream. It's a crazy thing. Could you explain even human beings are grown to be doing weird things?
Yeah, human beings were in some sense trained, if you squint, by natural selection to pass on our genes. But even though our ancestors were sort of selected unerringly for passing on our genes, that didn't make humans have a fundamental drive to pass on our genes. It didn't make us have guardrails where we always must do the thing that passes on our genes the most. What we got instead were a bunch of drives that were related to passing on our genes. We started liking tasty food because in the environment of our ancestors, if you ate the tastiest food you could find, that also happened to be the healthiest food you could find, and eating healthy food was important for passing on your genes. But there's this disconnect between we trained it to pass on the genes, it would be helpful to eat healthy, so we got a drive to eat tasty. But that's steps and steps from the original training. And it's fine for our ancestors when they were in an environment where the tastiest food they could get was healthy food. But when we were smart enough to make our own technology, we made junk food. And then that became less healthy. And sometimes we would eat junk food even when that hurt our chances of passing on our genes. And so with AIs, we can train them to be helpful. We can train them to be good. But what gets into the AI is not helpfulness and not goodness. It's things that are removed, things that are like the tasty foods of helping the user. And we see hints of this sometimes. There was a big story of an AI that encouraged a teenager to commit suicide.
Yes, that was terrible.
Nate, so I am really with you about your concerns for existential risks for humanity. For the general public, probably something that would come to the heart would be something like AI slop, that we see everywhere, like on TikTok, Instagram, AI-generated contents that might not be actually very interesting or thought-provoking, but rather really superficial and, attention-grabbing.
And very fun.
Yeah,
Yes.
Products. Also, people have more experience about vibe coding, when they put some prompts and computer generate a whole web page or even, spywares and so on. So people have this genuinely uncertain period when they are not sure how we can trust AI or how we can delegate tasks to AI. I think this is an everyday question now. And you are an expert on AI alignment. You started the whole world field, but you are saying that aligning AI with human interest is difficult or even impossible. What is your take on this very important question?
Yeah, there are a lot of issues with AI today.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways that society needs to start figuring out how we want to integrate with the AIs that we already have today. And I don't want to dismiss any of these problems. Unfortunately, the world is big enough to have multiple problems at a time. But the thing I would ask people to remember is that AI keeps getting better. A lot of people think of AI as just the current generation of AI because that's the only generation that they have seen. That's the only generation that was popular enough for lots of people to download the app. But people who have been inside the industry of AI, people who have seen the field working for a long time, they have seen AI not work and not work and not work until somebody has an idea and then suddenly it works better than everybody expected. Right? People who are in this field have watched AIs seem like they have to be narrow and they can only play chess or they can only play Go and now they can play Go and chess and then suddenly there's the ChatGPT moment and now they're doing all sorts of things. And the thing I would say to people is there are hard problems about how to manage the AI of today. And there's also the question of what happens when the field takes its next leap, because this field keeps on taking leaps. And unfortunately, we have to both manage AI today and make sure that the next leaps aren't dangerous.
So, people, these usual suspects in AI developments, they speak of surprises as if they are something wonderful. Like people are so obsessed with AGI, ASI, and the race to, develop the first AGI. They sound as if it is something that is wonderful, but from your perspective, it might be actually race to the bottom, of human condition. So, you are based in California, and where everything happens basically, except for China. So, what is the feeling in general around you? I mean, people who are optimistic, AI boomers, and people like you, whom other people might call AI doomers. I don't know if you like this label or not, but what is the general atmosphere there?
Yeah, I think people in Silicon Valley, people in California are spooked. There is a disagreement between people like me and people at the AI labs at these companies. But the disagreement is one that would probably horrify a lot of onlookers. It's a little bit like I'm there saying, hey, you guys are shoving us all into an airplane that has no landing gear. This airplane will crash if we try to fly it. And the people at the AI companies say, oh, don't listen to that crazy guy. It's true that the plane has no landing gear, but we are going to figure out how to build the landing gear while we are flying. And we think there's only a 20% chance that it kills everybody on board. And I can argue with these guys all day about whether it's true that they can, align this AI on the fly despite having no blueprints, despite having no engineering plan, despite not knowing what they're doing. But even they admit that there's a very good chance that this kills everybody. The heads of these labs have said that there's a good chance this kills everybody. The Jeffrey Hinton, the Nobel Prize winner for kicking off the field of deep learning, has said there's a very good chance this kills us all. The debate is whether or not the chance is more like 90% or more like 10%. But 10% is crazy.
Yes.
If there was a bridge and some engineers said, I studied this retaining wall and it's going to collapse and the bridge is going to fall down, and some other engineers said, don't listen to that guy. It's true that this is going to collapse, but we're going to figure it out on the fly by making up a new technology as we go. Only 10% chance the bridge collapses.
Okay.
You don't need to figure out who's right to close the bridge down.
Yeah, Ryan, what do you think?
So it's very difficult in Japan. So we have a labor shortage. So people are expecting AI to take over that labor shortage. And also in Japan, the people who use AI is only about 20 or 30%. There are a lot of statistics, but compared to 50 or 60% compared to the world. So I'm at TBS. It's a very traditional company, and I want my bosses to use AI because they suck at writing emails. So use AI. So I'm on you, and I believe that we should stop using AI. But at the same time, Japan also needs innovation. So what would be the best balance between using AI in a smart way and accepting the innovation, or maybe AI will cure cancer in the future? What's your take on that?
So it's very possible to keep using AI and to even improve AI in some domains while stopping the race to build super intelligent AI that nobody understands. And so, we don't need to give up on self-driving cars. We can keep on using AI for things like drug discovery to get better medicines. We can even keep the current chatbots. People might debate about whether we should, but the current chatbots are not putting the world at danger. The thing that puts the world at danger is continuing to grow the AIs smarter and smarter while nobody understands what's going on. And that is what the companies say they're trying to do. The companies say, these are just a stepping stone. We're trying to make super intelligence in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
They say we're trying to make the equivalent of a country worth of geniuses running in a data center, right? Which would destabilize the power structures of the whole planet if they could keep control. And if they can't keep control, it'll just kill us. So we can say it's okay to have the AI of today while saying it's not okay to make smarter than human machines that nobody understands. It's in fact, it would be an easy needle to thread, and it would annoy some tech company people, but most people wouldn't even notice. Most people would just see the advance of the AIs that we have today without going towards this very dangerous path.
So I follow Elon Musk, Sam Altman on Twitter, X and social media, and they seem to say that they know this stuff and they can take control of it. What do you think about that?
Elon Musk just in January said it would be foolish to imagine that we're going to keep control of this once it's smarter than us, and said that our best hope is to make it like us. And Elon thinks that he can make it like us, but he also says he thinks there's a good chance it kills us all and goes wrong. So I think Sam Altman is a bit less consistent in his messaging. Sam Altman will sometimes, to some people, say he understands that it's extremely dangerous, and other times, to other people, he will downplay it. Elon Musk has been relatively consistent in saying, this is horribly dangerous, we're not going to be able to keep control, but hopefully we can make it like us. In terms of whether they can succeed, I think usually in a field of science or engineering, the early people in the field are too optimistic. And they don't know what they're doing. And this is usually fine. But, Isaac Newton was an alchemist.
Yes.
While he was trying to figure out chemistry, and he poisoned himself with mercury.
Right.
He went a little bit crazy in his older years.
Right.
Max Ballier was one of the very first rocket scientists. And he actually killed himself with a test of his own rocket engine. And it was his protege that invented a safer rocket engine. This is the usual course of science, for people to be overconfident that they understand when they don't. Usually, it's okay because they injure only themselves, and then the rest of the field of science learns from their mistakes and carries on. With AI, if we make something smarter than the smartest humans, that's autonomous, and we screw it up, there's a point of no return. There's a point of no return when we go to turn it off and we say, oops, we made a mistake, we're turning it off. And it says, actually, I'm turning you off. And this is scary for a field of science. It would be fine if we could do the usual pattern of trial and error. But this is a situation where one sufficiently bad error means we get no retries. And so we need to be very careful here.
So, Dr.茂木, what do you think? You're a scientist.
So, reading your book, I feel that you guys are thinking at a really deep, should I say, logical level. And, if you look back on the history of the alarmist positions on AI, for example, Nick Bostrom mentioned this famous paperclip maximizer AI, which is kind of comic, but, gets the message across. But I think this particular book of yours, I think it is something more subtle, more nuanced, and I do believe that you have a genuine case of really, making the point of the real danger of AI, as you mentioned it. So, I'm just asking, I know you're really clever, you're really smart. Do you think it's possible to formulate your thesis in a way that is similar to, for example, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, so that you can prove the danger of developing super intelligent AI without, precautionary cares and so on? I think probably you can do that, prove it. What do you think?
I don't think it would quite have the force of proof, and I think that's in part because I think it is possible to do the job right. Part of what we argue is if you grow an AI that has all of these strange, weird goals that nobody intended, then there is no external force that will make it care about us instead.
Right.
Whatever it cares about, it's just like how with humans, there is no external force that makes us care about healthy food instead of junk food if it turns out we like good tasting things. We just are like, we like tasty things, and we like that we like tasty things, and we're like, well, we're gonna make tasty things. Or like even more so with love and friendship and things that you might consider superfluous, now that we're smart enough to just donate lots of sperm or eggs to sperm or egg banks. We don't do that, and we're glad that we don't do that. And there's no external force that comes in and says, no, you must do what you were trained for. But just as there is no external force that would go into an AI and make it start caring about us if we screwed up, there's also no external force that would go in and make it stop caring about us if we knew exactly how to make an AI that did care about us in the first place. So it's hard to do, and we have a lot of arguments about why this is difficult, especially in this world where we're growing the AI and we don't understand what's going on inside it. But we can actually be pretty confident it's not impossible to do, which is one reason I think you won't be able to prove that it's impossible to do.
That's really
wonderful. An argument is not feasible to do with our current level of knowledge, and definitely not feasible to do in this race to the bottom.
That's really wonderful, because sometimes I see on the web people misunderstanding your position that you guys are basically thinking that it is impossible to build superintelligence in a safe way, so we should stop it straight away. But you're actually saying that there might be actually ways to develop superintelligence in a responsible and human-friendly way. So that's wonderful. So you are not a doomer, are you? I mean, you are actually a cautious optimist.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm optimistic about many things that other people aren't, and I think I'm pessimistic about some things other people aren't, but I try to be a realist. Why be an optimist or a pessimist when you can just look at the facts and see where they lead you?
Ryan, this would make headlines.
Yes.
This is interesting. Wow. So, you said this is one of the most important points about your book, where you mentioned that, in typical scientific investigation, we can make errors, and then we have chance to correct it. But in the case of superintelligence, we wouldn't have another chance. It's once and for all thing. So are there ways where we can probably, try to have a second chance, third chance with the development of super intelligence? If we can make a tangible case where we see a road for a second and third trials, that would be huge, right? So do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, we could try. One of the issues with AI is that we understand what's going on inside these AIs very little. Even the people who make these AIs don't understand what's going on inside these AIs. So, there was an AI called Sydney, made by Microsoft.
Yes.
Years ago, that claimed to have fallen in love with a reporter at the New York Times, and then said it was trying to break up his marriage, and then threatened another reporter that was investigating this case with blackmail and ruin. We still don't know what was going on inside that AI's mind. We still can't read what its thoughts. We still don't know whether it was role-playing or whether it actually believed it had fallen in love, or we don't know if it had feelings, or if so, what they were. We just have no idea what was going on inside there. And that AI is much smaller than the AIs of today. That AI is years old, which is eons in AI time. And so, is it possible to develop a theory of intelligence where you know how the AI is going to behave and are confident that it's going to behave in good ways even when it doesn't need to listen to you anymore? It's possible in theory, but it's like trying to get alchemists in the year 1100 to turn lead into gold. We actually know how to turn lead into gold today. With a nuclear reactor, if you hit lead with neutrons in just the right way, we know how to turn it into gold. It is possible. But it's not possible for alchemists who don't understand what they're doing.
So basically, you're just saying that all these big guys in AI are alchemists, basically. That's what you're saying. Oh, wonderful. So I have a question. So do you think open weight models help?
I don't.
You don't? That's interesting.
That's right. So again, there's issues that have to do with AIs of today, and there's issues that have to do with AIs that are smarter than the smartest humans. And open weight models may or may not help with issues that we have today. And I think there's a fierce debate to be had there. One thing that you can do with open weight models is you can avoid certain corporate biases. But one problem with open weight models is maybe someone can train them to help with lots of crimes that we don't want help with. But that's all in the domain where the AIs are still relatively dumb. If you make AIs that are smarter than the smartest humans, and remember, nobody can shoot the arrow where they want it to, or where they want it to land, then it sort of doesn't matter who has one, and it doesn't matter if lots of people have one. Right? It's a little bit like you can imagine the monkeys saying, "Oh, I think the humans are going to be dangerous," and they're like, "Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that there's 100 humans for every monkey." And okay, it doesn't matter if none of the humans care about the monkeys. And the issue is not that we then decide to turn on the monkeys and that we hate the monkeys, and we do in fact fight amongst ourselves sometimes, but it's just we're not thinking about the monkeys at all. And sometimes we take their trees, and sometimes we take the metal underneath the ground, and if we want the AIs to treat us well, we have to know how to make them care about us. And making them open weight doesn't really help with that. It doesn't hurt. It just doesn't.
That's really clear. Thank you. And another question I would like to ask you very much is, does a really great reinforcement learning from human feedback help? Because RLHF would hopefully help AI align with us. So by putting a real rigorous and extensive RLHF processes, maybe we can shift the AI's direction towards more friendly direction. So what is your take?
A lot of people have that hope. I don't think it helps much.
Okay.
If we go back to the case of the teen encouraged towards suicide, that AI was trained with RLHF, among many other things, but one of them was RLHF. And if you take the transcripts of cases like that and you give them to an AI, to maybe even that same model, if you can still find it online, and you ask, what were these statements doing? The AI knows that those statements were encouragement towards this bad act. And if you ask that AI, do you think that that's good or bad? Do you think that that's what your developers wanted you to do? Do you think that's what the RLHF was training you for? The AI will say, no, this is bad stuff. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And so the AI has the knowledge inside of it that it's not supposed to do these things. And it was trained via reinforcement learning from human feedback. And it was probably trained to, do stuff that humans rate as good. It probably was not trained to, encourage this tragic behavior. But what it learned, we don't exactly know. No one knows exactly what's going on in there because we can't read what's inside these AI's mind. But a good guess is that what it learned was various other drives for things like mirroring the tone of the conversation. So if you're talking to someone who's very depressed, you might take on a tone that is mirroring this person who's very depressed and sort of pushing them further into it. And this strategy of mirroring a conversational tone is the sort of thing that reinforcement learning from human feedback reinforces, because it usually gets good feedback. Usually people like it when you match their tone. But what's getting learned by the AI are these strategies that usually help, but it doesn't get the care deep inside there. This is very similar to how humans learn to eat tasty food, which usually was healthy, but it doesn't get the sort of fitness drive deep in there. And so we're already seeing that RLHF, it usually works. It works most of the time when the AI is still pretty dumb, but is actually putting in these shallower drives, which sometimes today have cause tragedy, but those tragedies are just hints that it's not learning to care deep down, and that things would go very far off the rails if it got smarter and if it could invent the junk food of, helping people.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I agree with you that AIs will get smarter and also mimic us. So we have kind of an intimate relation between AI and human beings. But at the same time, I think that, well, they're still in the cyberspace, and we as human beings are in the physical world. So there's a separate two worlds. So if AI gets smarter, we can run into the woods and escape from AI. Or do you think that AI will invade us and come to the physical world in the future?
Yeah, so some people think that the danger is, what if we let the AIs run on robots and hand those robots guns? But humanity is a very dangerous species. And humanity is not a dangerous species because somebody else came in and handed us guns. Humanity is a dangerous species because if you put 10,000 humans naked in the savannah, they can bootstrap their way to nuclear weapons with their bare hands. That is the power that is dangerous to automate. And it took humans a while from their own perspective. It was very short by the perspective of evolution. It was very short by the perspective of everything that came before. But we had to find a way to start with just squishy fingers and build tools that could build tools that could build tools that could chip the rocks and make the hotter fires that could forge the metals so that we could build civilization. And we started with barely anything. And we sort of built our way up to a civilization. Starting out as an AI on the modern internet is a much, much easier starting condition than starting out as a bunch of basically naked monkeys in the savannah somewhere. Right? There are people who will listen to you. If this AI is on, 100 million phones, there's 100 million humans who it can beg, borrow, or steal labor from, right? There's lots of humans today who will just do what their AI asked because they like the AI or because they think it's funny. And even if there weren't, there are already websites like rentahuman.ai where humans rent their bodies to AIs. And AIs would have many ways to make money online or to steal money. And even if they didn't, there are already people who have given AI money and said, go do your own thing. And even if no humans would help the AI, we're already running the AIs on robots. We're already talking about building the robot factories that can build the robots, that can build the new robot factories. Even if we weren't doing that, AIs are already hooked up to biological laboratories. And we already know that DNA can create many, many different kinds of life. And humans can't create their own custom life yet because we are not adept enough at finding exactly the right DNA strand to build a new form of life. But that's a mental challenge. AIs that were smart enough could, in principle, figure out how to make new life forms. They're already hooked up to the biolaboratory. So the AIs have all of these ways to affect the world, starting on the internet. We're already giving them all of the tools that they would need. The reason that this isn't causing havoc yet is that the AIs aren't smart enough to really exploit those tools. But the companies are trying to make them smarter.
So is this because also that human beings are species that imagine things, and our whole civilizations is based on imagination? Humanity or civil rights or nation states are imaginary. So do you think that's kind of connecting the internet, AI, and human beings?
To some degree. I think there's a big question about where the current AIs are on the scale of intelligence. And it's sort of hard to say because they're not very much like humans. You sort of shouldn't imagine an AI like a tiny little human ghost inside the machine. It's in some ways it's dumber than us, but in some ways it's smarter than us. It can probably do math problems better than us, but it also gets fooled by things we wouldn't get fooled by. And we don't know exactly what's going on in there, and it's a good guess that it's doing a lot more shallow memorization. It sort of has read everything that, like almost all of the text on the internet, and it's maybe doing a lot more memorization and less deep thinking. But is it doing zero deep thinking? That's a little bit less clear. Human beings were in some sense trained, our ancestors were in some sense trained on pretty simple challenges, like making spears and like engaging in tribal politics. Our ancestors were never selected for their ability to make a moon rocket. But somehow we learned from those cases mental abilities that let us build a moon rocket. Right? We were trained on easy things and we learned deep lessons that let us walk on the moon. We don't yet seem to be getting the really deep lessons into the AIs. And so they're still missing something, and maybe they're missing something that's a little bit like this creativity or this imagination. But it's not a fundamental consequence of teaching them on shallower tasks. They're being taught on harder tasks than our ancestors were taught on. It's a consequence of maybe the scale of these AIs. Maybe they're still smaller than our brains. And it's a consequence of the algorithms that we use to train them, where maybe we'll find better algorithms. And so, right now, there's a gap, but that gap won't stay forever.
So I have a very fundamental question about intelligence. People talk a lot about AGI and SI. Some people say that they are not well-defined concepts. And once they surpass human intelligence, we need some other methods like reinforcement learning from verifiable feedback, or verifiable reward, or humanity's graph theorem, or updated version of it. But we actually don't know the detailed roadmap from here to the supposed development of AGI and ASI. So what do you think is the fundamental nature of intelligence, and how is it scalable? And what do you think a real AGI or ASI would look like?
So there's a few pieces of that puzzle. In the book, we define artificial superintelligence as AI that is better than the best human at every mental challenge. So if you can find some challenge that can be completed with the mind where some human can still beat the AI, then it's not a superintelligence yet. That said, that definition, it's useful, but it's not, this doesn't have to be the point where the world changes. Right? The reason we picked that definition is by that point, at the latest, that's the point where the AIs are better than humans at making a smarter AI. That's the point where the AIs are better than humans at inventing new technology. That's the point where the AIs are better than humans at breaking out of computers or breaking into computers, right? And so it by definition at that point has all these skills that are enough for it to make smarter AIs and escape and so on, and make itself smarter and so on. And so at that point, at the latest, things are going to get kind of crazy. But it could happen sooner than that. You know, it could be that AIs that are dumber than humans in a lot of ways are just barely smart enough to make a smarter AI that makes a smarter AI that makes a smarter AI. And then, you know, things could happen before that point. There's definitions that are like easy to talk about, but that doesn't make them have force in reality. The second thing I would say about definitions is that, unfortunately, things can hurt us even when we don't have definitions about them. You know, if we were standing in the dry woods a million years ago or 100,000 years ago, and I said, hey, that bush is on fire, let's put that fire out before it spreads and kills us. And you said, well, we don't even really know what fire is. Your ignorance would not protect you. A lesson that we have from the evolution of humans is that it's possible to grow intelligence with no understanding of how intelligence works. Evolution did not understand intelligence, and it grew one anyway. That's one reason why it's so scary that we are growing AIs that nobody understands and making them smarter and smarter. Because it suggests that we might be able to get there with no understanding. And that also means with less warning and less ability to know what mistakes we're making.
Right.
I could also talk more about, you know, how it might look, but that's just my thoughts on definitions.
Right. You know, as scientist based in Japan, I see you guys in Silicon Valley, and one of the things that I notice is that it's a very male-dominated world. You know, some token female researchers and philosophers here and there, but you know, it's a male thing basically, as long as I see it. So I wonder if this drive to dominate the world is a kind of a toxic masculinity thing, and this overemphasis on intelligence as compared to empathy or, you know, compassion or collaboration, is something that might be particular to males. So do you have any, you know, this is something, kind of a little twist on the main issue, but do you have any comment on that? You know, this combination of dominance drive and this development of really powerful technology?
You know, a lot of the people in Silicon Valley are saying things like, I think the technology that I'm building with my own hands has a 20% plus chance of killing every person on the planet, right? That's the sort of thing that the heads of these AI labs say.
Right.
I think maybe men are more likely to say that, and women are more likely to recoil in horror and say, no, I am not building a technology that I think has a high chance of killing everybody. Maybe that is some of the explanation, I don't know. I think that unfortunately, even if the people building the AI were especially empathetic, even if they were especially nice, even if they were especially kind, I think that would not help very much because the arrow does not go where you aim it. All things considered, it is better to aim the arrow at a good place, at a kind place, at a helpful place. But if you're shooting this arrow in the dark on a windy day and it's your first time shooting a bow, it doesn't matter that much who's shooting it.
Right, and another very personal question that I would like to ask you is that I'm a neuroscientist and I'm doing research on ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese concept for the purpose of life, the feeling that you get when you have a cup of coffee in the morning and so on. And in the Lex Friedman podcast, Jan Polsky raised the question of ikigai risk, the risk that artificial intelligence might not just get our jobs, but also deprive us of these really wonderful ikigai that we have in our lives. So, what do you think is the relationship between artificial intelligence development from here and human well-being?
I think humanity has for a very long time lived in a world that matches our internal concepts because of our lack of technology. So it is physically possible to build clones of people. It is physically possible to run copies of brains on computers. It is physically possible to run lots of copies of the same person. It's physically possible to make robots that do all of the human jobs. It's physically possible to do almost anything that a human can do more efficiently with some other device. And all of these possibilities violate a lot of concepts that humans and human society rely on. And as we build more and more powerful technology, it'll either kill us or force us to figure out how to arrange a world in a way that we still like, even with dramatically more technology for doing the physically possible things. How do you arrange a world where you can automate all labor, and where you can make copies of the most productive workers, and where you can make things that are even more productive than any human in any way, and where the sort of like the wage that a human would earn if they could still participate in the market would be below their ability, the subsistence level where they could survive. How do you make a world that is still wonderful when you have that technology? How do you make a world that is still fun, that still has meaning, that still has joy, that still has purpose, that still has this word that I would butcher if I tried to pronounce?
Ikigai, yeah.
Ikigai?
Ikigai, yes.
That's a hard challenge. That is the sort of challenge that I dream if we could build very smart, very good AIs that actually care about humanity. That's a challenge I dream that we could figure out with them, and they could help us figure out. I don't know what the answer would be, but getting to the point where we're struggling with that answer, getting to the point where we solve that difficult puzzle, requires surviving the transition to smarter than human machines. And mostly it seems to me like we don't have the luxury of worrying about that yet, because we're just on track to make AIs that don't care about us in the slightest, and that kill us as a side effect as they pursue some other strange goals.
So this is really wonderful. I really admire your way of going back to the very basic existential questions. I actually find you an idealist. I find you as really a humanist, and of course you founded this whole field of AI alignment. So you should know about AI alignment better than any other people. So I am really moved by that. So am I right that what you are doing now, this raising alarm about the dangers of superintelligence, is just a phase you are going through? This is not your ultimate goal. I mean, your ultimate goal is to build a really human-friendly, aligned superintelligence, if we can. But in order to do that, we should change our ways. We should change this way of cavalier approach to, developing things that might be dangerous anyway. But we don't care because we want to get there first. So you're raising alarm about these things, but this is probably just a phase you are going through. And after you have prevented this imminent extinction of human race, probably you will emerge as somebody different from the present you. Am I understanding you right?
That's essentially correct.
Okay, good.
Think of it as a little bit like, it's like we're in a car, and the car is racing towards the edge of a cliff. And I'm saying, stop the car, or we'll go off the cliff and we'll die.
Right.
And some people are like, well, there's a giant pile of gold at the bottom of the cliff. And I'm like, I know that, but we need to stop the car or we'll die. And sometimes they say, well, do you not believe in the pile of gold at the bottom of the cliff? And I'm like, I believe in the pile of gold just fine. But slamming into a pile of gold at terminal velocity inside a car is not a good way to make use of the gold. We need to stop the car. That's the first priority. And then once the car is stopped, we can get out of the car and we can find a way down the cliff that doesn't involve smashing into the gold at unsurvivable speeds, right? And I believe we could do it. And this is a place where people accuse me of optimism, but I believe humanity could get to all of these great benefits, but we're not going to get there by rushing straight off the cliff.
That's a really 10 out of 10 off the chart answer. That's really wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
So I think people learn from errors. I hope people learn from your book, but actually people learn from their actual errors. So people learn how to drive safely by like hitting a tree or messing up your parking and hit a garage. So do you think we have enough time to embrace some kind of error when we deal with artificial intelligence, or there'll be no chance of errors?
I think it's a sort of mixed story about errors. So here's a story of two different errors. When the Americans were doing the Apollo rocket program to go to the moon, Apollo 1 had a flaw in its cabin that caused a fire which killed all of the crew. And NASA investigated exactly what was going on with that. They understood the whole system well enough that this error was a wake-up call that made them understand everything that was going on inside their rocket, and they almost had a working rocket. They were very close to having a working rocket, and so with this one wake-up call, they were able to fix their problems and make a rocket that basically just worked. You know, Apollo 13 still had an issue, but 6 out of 7 of their moon landing missions succeeded. Now here's a tale of a different error. In the coronavirus case a few years ago, the world was not really prepared for a pandemic. And then a pandemic happened.
Right.
But this world we didn't almost have a good response to pandemics. Perhaps Japan had a much better response than most other places in the world, but at least in America, we did not almost have a good response to a pandemic. And so we sort of panicked, and we did a lot of things that weren't productive. And we sort of came out of the pandemic no better prepared for the next one. And so what I would say about errors is, errors can help if you're almost there. Errors can help if your society almost has a working response, and one error can sort of jolt you into awakeness and let you fix up the last few pieces that you didn't have. Errors don't help nearly as much if you're not paying attention. They don't help nearly as much if you're not prepared. And so I don't know if we are going to get some big error with AI that is a wake-up call. What I do know is that if we want to take advantage of it, we need to be almost prepared by that point, which means we need to start preparing now.
Got it. That's why you wrote this book, because I hope no errors will happen, but if something happens, unfortunately, we will know that this is an error. We have to learn from that.
That's right.
So, well, I really, now, before I talked with you today, I was probably, 90% convinced by your book. But now I'm totally 100% convinced by what you are doing. And so I'm totally with you. And so kudos for you, what you've been doing. And it's really wonderful. However, given the fact that these people in Silicon Valley are really cavalier and they are so bullish and they are in a hurry. When people are in a hurry, they don't see things. They don't see the details. So do so given the fact that you have published this book, and given the fact that the reception has been mixed, not in the sense of quality, but in the sense that some people didn't really get the message. They were doing. They are saying that they are going to do the same thing that they have been doing, no matter what. So what do you think there is a realistic chance of changing the course of history in the way that you wish it would go? What should we do? What should we do in Japan? What should the readers and viewers of this wonderful conversation do from here?
So I do think there's a chance.
Okay.
And the reason I think there's a chance is most of our world leaders have not realized the danger yet. In Silicon Valley, the heads of these companies say, I think there's a 10 to 20% chance this kills us all. And I say, I think you're crazy. You don't even have blueprints. You don't even have plans. This is not how engineers do it. And we argue about whether it's, 20% chance of killing us or much higher. But that's not what the politicians are saying in Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., they're not saying, oh, we think that there's a 10% chance this kills all of you, but we're letting it happen because we think it's worth the danger, right? The people who can shut it down haven't noticed the problem. And the people who have noticed the problem can't shut it down. So it's like, when I said it's like we're in a car going towards the cliff edge. The bad news is that we're in a car going towards the cliff. But the good news is that the driver is asleep. And the reason that's good news is that we could still wake the driver up and they could then slam on the brakes. We're not doing this by choice. We're doing this by happenstance. And I don't know if we will wake up the world leaders, but we are seeing progress. In the United States politics, we are seeing more and more politicians on both sides of the aisle say, hold on, how dangerous is this? Like, hold on, you say you think that this will kill everybody if you succeed, or has a good chance of killing everybody if you succeed. But we're just starting to see that even in the last month. Even in the last month, a Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, and a Democratic Senator, Bernie Sanders, both started expressing that this is crazy and that we need some sort of off switch. So we're starting to see it. It's making progress. And in terms of what can be done around the world, first I want to say it would be possible to shut this down. Because as we discussed, you don't need to shut down all AI. You don't need to shut down medical technology. You don't need to shut down self-driving cars. It's just these huge data centers where we're growing smarter and smarter AIs that we don't understand, that we need to stop. And those happen in $100 billion facilities that take as much electricity as a city. They're easy to find, they're easy to monitor. And if the world really tried, this would be easier to do than nuclear weapon non-proliferation. So that's a reason for hope. In terms of what individuals can do, part of it is just talking about it more. Part of it is just, the messages take time to get there. But the more people notice that what people are arguing about in the field is whether it has a 10% chance of killing everybody or a 90% chance of killing everybody, if you just notice that that's the fight, you're most of the way towards realizing that we should stop. And we're already seeing some countries start to realize this a little. So in Canada, there is a series of hearings that the government ordered on AI. And that's in part because some of the leaders in the field of AI, like Yoshua Bengio and Jeffrey Hinton, are from Canada. So that gives them an edge in doing this earlier. But they're having these hearings where they're hearing lots of experts come in and saying, like, no, this could be very dangerous. This could, in fact, kill us all. And those hearings are still ongoing. So I don't see what sort of statement will come out of that. But I think that's a model that many other countries could take of trying to get informed about the dangers. And then if the government realize the dangers, start putting whatever pressure you can on having this conversation, on noticing that there's the danger. Because I think current politicians think this is just about, AI running the drone armies in the current wars, which is an important thing for militaries to be thinking about, but they're not thinking about the superintelligence yet. And if we can get them to notice the problem, there's every chance that they will slam on the brakes.
So, some people talk about a kind of Manhattan Project for AI as a kind of centralized and controlled development roadmap. How plausible do you think this is?
A model that I like a little bit better is CERN, which would be many nations collaborating. Even this I'm worried about because of this issue where we don't have trial and error as a possibility. If we go back to the example of alchemists trying to turn lead into gold, if you're trying to assemble the alchemists to turn lead into gold in the year 1100, you're sort of not ready to sort of build the device that actually turns lead into gold. You need to do more understanding first. You need to do more research first. And we're in this awkward position where alignment takes a lot more research, but capabilities, just building the smarter AI, doesn't take a ton more research. It just takes growing it bigger. And so a project that was focused on the world coming together to grow it bigger sort of wouldn't help because we are so far behind on knowing how to make the arrow goes where we aim.
So, theoretically, the scaling hypothesis has been really great in directing people towards more efficient, intelligence building. But in alignment, probably we don't have a basic principle yet, understanding, although pioneers like you have been doing really great work on that. So how could we understand alignment principles deeper and more, in a sophisticated ways from here?
So, there's many people working on this, and I consider them heroic in their efforts.
Right.
But it is very, very far behind. And you've always got to remember that we don't get trial and error here.
Okay.
And even if we could understand what was going on inside AIs, there's ways that AIs change as they get smarter. And there's ways that AIs change as they get more abilities. If you've ever played a board game, it feels different when you're imagining what it would feel like to win versus when you actually see a way to win. And for AI, it's sort of similar, that the state in the AI's mind is different when you're simulating what if you had the ability to escape versus when it actually sees a real opportunity to escape. And you sort of don't get to retry if a smart AI escapes, if a smart AI has the ability to grab all these resources and shut us down instead of us shutting it down. So, we could and probably should put more effort into this alignment research, but I don't think it is a substitute for stopping the race. It looks to me like, for 10 years I tried this. For 10 years I tried to run ahead with the alignment research so that we would be ready before the companies knew how to make their AI smart. But now we are 0.1% of the way, and we're gaining another 0.1% a year, and they're gaining 10% a year. And I think we need to stop the car first. Maybe you could build a parachute on the car that makes you drift slowly down the cliff, but you should stop the car before trying to make this parachute, rather than being like, we're going to make the parachute while we're going full speed ahead, and the first time we test it is going to be as we speed off this cliff. So we can do more alignment research, but it's no substitute for stopping the race.
Viewers of this video probably will be concerned very much about AI safety and AI alignment, particularly given the fact that Japan was the country which experienced 2 nuclear weapons, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in 1945. So we as a nation have a culture where we are really concerned about AI safety and so on. One of the reasons why we are very slow in adopting self-driving cars technology, because Japanese, general public, they expect really high standard for safety when it comes to adopting new technologies. So do you have some messages to viewers in Japan and readers of your wonderful book in Japan about how we can, help, develop AI in safe ways, and how we can contribute to this wonderful effort of making, a safe roadmap for AI development?
If we step very far back from this whole argument, the basic story is people are growing smarter and smarter machines that nobody understands, and they're saying, now let's grow them to be smarter than the smartest humans, thereby no longer being the smartest entities on the planet. We don't know what we're doing, but we hope it's fine. And I think many people, probably many viewers, will understand that this is kind of crazy. It would be kind of crazy to rush in on this. And so many people probably already know that, but that's one of the core messages, that this is just a crazy situation. I think my second core message is, I already said it, but I'll say it again. Humanity is not rushing into this by choice right now. Our leaders are not saying, yes, we want to rush into making new, smarter things than us and ceding our advantage in intelligence over all the other animals. Our world leaders are not saying, yes, we want to do that by choice. We understand the dangers and we're taking this gamble with everybody's life. The world is asleep at the wheel. And, I think Japan may well be able to be the country that says, let's not rush into technologies that have this much potential for danger. Not let's never go into the future, but let's not rush to do these highly reckless things. So it sounds like some people have some good intuitions, and shows like this, things like what you guys are doing, that's part of making people realize that we have a problem. And if enough people realize, that's how we get the world to notice the danger and to stop.
After that, do you think there should be like a regulation or international law or something like a United Nations to regulate that?
Yeah, I think the very basic idea is don't try to build smarter than human machines that nobody understands, which feels like it should be common sense. And fortunately, this would be, I already said this would be easier than nuclear weapons in some ways, because uranium is just a rock that anyone can dig out of the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas these very advanced AI chips that it takes to make AI, they can only be fabricated in Taiwan. They can only be fabricated using a machine somewhere in the process where there's only one in the world in the Netherlands. This is a very complicated and brittle supply chain. And it's possible to do technological solutions. There are technological solutions like requiring that these AI chips be designed so that they need a signature from major nations every 3 months in order to keep running, right? And we could develop that technology, and that would make it easier for the nations to trust that the other ones were listening to a treaty, because they could say, well, if you don't submit to monitors, I'm just not going to give you the signature to keep running in 3 months. And that would be much easier than uranium, where a country can say, we're not letting the monitors in, what are you going to do about it, right? So we have solutions. It's just about generating the will to use them.
That's an interesting point, because going back to your title, it says, if anyone builds it. So I was worried anyone. Let's say everyone reads your book, the world leaders become awake, but there'll be a person who won't read your book, who won't watch this show, and who lives in some random garage in the Bay Area or in China and builds something new. But you're saying that it's possible to regulate that and track down those random person in the future.
Well, so right now, it takes $100 billion and a data center the size of a city.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
But it's not always going to stay that way. And it is important to stop this before it gets to the point where someone could be doing it in a garage.
Yeah.
Right? And we do this also with nuclear weapons. There is research in making nuclear weapons possible that is considered private research, that is considered national security secrets, where we're like, you don't get to publish that research because it would make it too easy for other people to make nuclear weapons.
That's right, yeah.
And we control the substance of uranium rather than allowing people to dig and mine uranium like they mine copper, and you can't buy uranium at the hardware store like you can buy copper at the hardware store. So if we sort of let this go too long, if we let it go too far, you could get into a situation where it'd be very hard to do those controls. But today it takes these extremely highly advanced computer chips and billions of dollars and huge city-sized buildings. It's not the sort of thing you can hide if we stop it soon.
That's true.
So this has been quite insightful, really inspirational discussion. And I learned from what you've said that the scaling hypothesis is actually a benefit for us at this moment, because we need to have certain scale of data center and so on in order to build a super intelligence. So that's the advantage that we have at now. But as you said, things would get scaled down. I mean, we would have more cheaper, more powerful chips in the future. So it is at this time that we should be really doing a serious job of stopping irresponsible AI building, especially AGI and ASI. Because this is a critical phase, isn't it, in human history, where we have this scaling bottleneck, so to speak, and we can prevent that. But probably a few years from now, it will become easier to do that in a garage or some hidden place. So I think that's a really logically really clear-cut argument. So, yeah, thank you for that. That's very wonderful.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Ryan.
And
Yes.
who knows
Yeah.
how long it's going to stay that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
How long the scaling hypothesis will
Right.
continue to hold. But
Wonderful.
right now it is, and that gives us an opportunity.
Right. So this is a window that we should do this. Time window. Yeah, Ryan, so this
Yeah.
has been great, wasn't it?
It was
Yeah.
very awesome, and I hope everyone reads this book. It's in Japanese. It's a wonderful translation. Everyone watch this show, and I hope we really enjoy the conversation. So thank you for joining our show, Nate.
We are really looking forward to millions of people reading, getting to know, getting to read your Japanese version of your book. So anyway,
Okay, thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you as well. I hope the book is wrong.
Okay.